Step 1, release your fears. Before you start writing your birth plan or hire anyone to support you in your birth, you need to know one thing. You are more likely to achieve the desired outcome you want if you have imagined yourself doing it first. If you start out saying, I want a natural birth, but you can't actually picture how that can happen and get clear on the feeling you will have when you do it, then you need to change that first. You see, if you want a natural birth, but feel that it's not already inevitable, then there's a hidden fear lurking deep in your subconscious, asking, but what if I can't do it? This is especially true if you come from a family background where no one has had a completely physiological birth at home. So you may say that this is what you want, but the internal story that is going on is actually doing everything to put fear and doubt in your head. This is why when you decide you want a natural birth, you go out and ask the mom groups what they recommend in terms of coping with the pain. And then in the same breath, you might also wonder if maybe you should get the epidural or consider it just in case. You'll go read a bunch of books, but then someone will say something about how they read the same one and still got a cesarean. And you'll wonder if the book isn't actually going to help you. You'll ask your doctor about natural birth, but then when they tell you their heavily medically controlled version of it, that sounds almost as scary as having a cesarean. So then you're freaking out because you don't know if you'll be able to progress at the rate they're telling you, or grow a baby under a certain size, or be able to go into labor by your due date to avoid an induction. Here's the secret. If you want a natural birth, you can get one. But you must actually believe that it's possible. What is standing in your way is not your body's ability to birth. It's fear. Society and our birth culture have done a really good job of scaring the crap out of you for as long as you have been alive and birth has been on your radar. It started the first time you saw birth on TV. Recently, I was watching Once Upon a Time with my 6-year-old daughter. Snow, Mary Margaret, was giving birth and she was screaming in pain on a bed. Fortunately, as a birth worker, I could rant and rail at the screen and remind my daughter that's not physiological birth. Unless you happen to be fortunate enough to have your mother tell you the same as you grew up, you probably watched scenes like that and were convinced that birth is always painful and traumatic, that you will be in stirrups with someone telling you to push, and you will be in so much pain and it will be unbearable. But that's the trickery of our media. And the entire goal is to sensationalize and dramatize everything. Birth is rarely calm and beautiful in TV and movies. In fact, the only scene that stands out as showing a powerful birthing moment is in Wanderlust, where Paul Rudd's character witnesses a free birth and is freaking out the whole time while the mother is riding the waves and practically having an orgasm as her baby emerges. It's played off for laughs, of course, and the intention is, look at this crazy hippie chick birthing in this totally unrealistic way that would never happen. But to anyone who has actually witnessed and experienced physiological birth, it's not as out there as the filmmakers would have you believe. So, if birth isn't always horrifically painful, then why does our society say it is? Because there is a vested interest in keeping you afraid of your own power to birth. And it all goes back to the myth that Christianity created that Eve and all women after her were cursed to birth children in sorrow. I need to point out that whether you believe in the story or not, whether you are spiritual, religious, atheist, or agnostic, the reality is that story came from somewhere and someone else eventually interpreted and translated it. People take stories and create their own meanings to explain their own experiences or to even push an agenda. You can see this example simply by watching people argue over books, TV, even movies. They all have a different interpretation of the same scenes and character motivations, and they can get pretty heated. The truth is that the only one who knows the true intention and themes of the story or the character's motivations is the person who first created that story. The same will be true for your story. No matter what others say about it, your experience of your pregnancy and birth is the most accurate version of the events as they pertain to your thoughts and feelings about your experience. That means that only you get to decide what's okay and what's not, what's traumatic and what's not, what a good birth means to you versus what you would consider a bad birth, what's safe. You get what I'm saying. If you truly want to take control of your birth experience, it's going to start with the story you tell yourself. Your first exercise is going to be to examine all of those things that you're telling yourself about whether you can have the birth you really want, and start asking where it all came from. Whose story have you been running in your head? And what interpretation and meaning are you giving it? Can it be changed? Could the author of that story have intentionally left something out? Maybe they weren't even aware that they haven't included any context. Think about a time someone told you a story that didn't make sense. What was missing from it that might have made it easier to understand? Or think of something you were told that frightened you. One example is a very popular article that constantly gets reshared on social media by multiple parent news sites. It's called, "My Natural Birth Traumatized Me." That grabbed your attention, right? Well, the problem is that most people who comment on that article don't actually read it. They're simply triggered by those words in the headline, and they start pouring into the comments with all their opinions and truths about how natural birth is so overrated. But there's more beyond the surface. If you read that article, you'll see that the protagonist did not have a natural birth. She simply went unmedicated, had Pitocin, and endured the pain of an assisted vaginal delivery where they pulled the baby out with the vacuum or ventouse, and she tore badly. That's what the traumatic natural birth was. Many people are simply passing on these same story headlines over and over and not diving under the surface to read the article. Every time you hear a scary birth story or someone says something that upsets you, take a moment and think, is this the full article and all the context, or is this just a clickbait headline? So now you understand why you might be freaking terrified of birth, but the question is, how do you get out of that fear? That's where your homework comes in. All right. So as I said, if you don't follow these instructions, you don't do the journal exercise, this is not going to help you. You're just going to be like, that was a really nice video. I learned a lot. I really enjoyed this. Or get the book and you're like, that was a really nice book. I love it. I learned a lot. But if you don't do the exercises, this is not going to work, because you are immersed in that culture of fear. You're immersed in a society where the medical system basically controls birth, and you're not going to get that true natural birth experience unless you tackle your fears. So these journal questions are crucial to the empowered birth method. This is what I coached all of my clients on. This is the questions that I asked them. We went deep. They would talk to me. We would bounce ideas off of each other. They would express these questions and they would get clarity. Now, obviously, I'm not coaching you directly. You are just getting this book. You are just getting these action steps. You're watching this video. You need to do this yourself. It's self-study. Okay. If you do want to work with me directly, I do have a process. However, again, you need to have done these exercises first. Otherwise, it's just not going to work for you. It's just not going to work for you. One of my empowered birth ambassadors might ask you these questions and get some clarity for you if you really did want to work with me at that level. But otherwise, this is important. You need to follow these questions. If you want the full list, go to empoweringmomsbirth.com/extras and go and get it. Okay? So I'm going to ask the questions. You're going to follow along, and it's up to you if you do the work or not. I can't force you, but as I said, this is the system that I used for myself. This is the system I use for all my clients. This works. This works better than I ever thought possible when I started coaching my clients and they had high risk labels. And it's like everybody in the medical system doubted that they could do it, and they've done it because they've been able to get out of their fear. So this is the first step. It's important. You need to ask these questions. So journal exercise 1.1. So here's what you need to do. Take out your notebook and a pen. And for the next few days, I want you to simply observe what stories you're absorbing about birth. Pay attention to ads, TV shows, movies, books, things that you overhear in conversations, social media, anywhere that anyone is talking about birth or birth is being shown. You can even dive deeper into things you've seen in the past. Think about those messages you received and ask yourself these questions. Number 1, what happened? Number 2, what thoughts come to mind immediately when you think about this? Number 3, what feelings come up for you? Are you scared, excited, sad, angry? What sensations in your body are you feeling when you think about this? Are you tense? Do you feel relaxed? Do you feel expanded? Do you feel contracted? What is that feeling and sensation? And number 5, what do you need to know in order to feel safe and believe that this won't happen to you? Are there similar stories where there was a happier outcome? So take as much time as you need when asking these questions. It is an ongoing process, and you will find as your pregnancy progresses that more people might try to dump their fears on you. Practicing this exercise multiple times now will allow you to do it much faster later, so that when someone does try to scare you at the end of your pregnancy, and they will, you won't be stuck in that fear. In fact, some of my clients have gone into incredibly stressful appointments with their doctors and been able to hold their ground simply by recognizing what is coming up for them and remembering that their doctor is operating out of their own fear. Now, as a first-time mom, you might be asking how you can challenge stories without any prior experience. After all, how can you really know that labor isn't as horrifically painful as people are telling you if you've never had first-hand experience? That's where the right education will help you immensely to sort out myth from reality. In fact, this is how I was able to do a complete 180 at the start of my first pregnancy and plan a home birth, despite the fact that I had no idea what labor would actually feel like. So get ready, because you're going to get my crash course in childbirth education.